Welcome back to the Fish Tank presented by iHeartRadio right here on the Miami Dolphins Podcast Network. Seth Levitt and the toughest podcaster Dan Marino ever played with. He is OJ McDuffie. Juice, how we doing today, brother?
Man, Seth, why do you ask that question when you know how pumped I am about, playing with a guy, having a guy on the podcast that's on the right side of the football.
Yeah.
Not only that, the guy that I make sure you make sure you love and show love to guys like this when you're a wide receiver, man. So when you get a quarterback on,
yeah,
I'm super pumped. You know that.
You're always loving up on the quarterbacks, and I don't think it's a coincidence, right?
No,
I don't think it's a coincidence at all.
Smart man, Seth. You know what I mean? And it's a fellow Big Ten guy now too, so that helps. Smart. We're smart in the Big Ten, bro. Oh, look at that.
It's all starting to come together. Not wasting any time. Well, listen, you heard the voice. And I guess if you clicked on the podcast, you already know the guest. There's no surprise, but we are absolutely pumped up to have Joey Harrington join us here in the Fish Tank. Joey, first and foremost, thank you. We had to, I guess, kind of weather the time difference, but we figured it out, and you're here, and we're grateful.
I appreciate you having me. Yeah, this is, I don't know. I'm just so used to Pacific time that I don't even think about, it was, okay, here's the thing. When I started, I got drafted. I went straight to Detroit, and that was East Coast time. And I couldn't finish watching a football game. I couldn't watch. I'd turn on the TV at 5 o'clock expecting a kickoff, and no, it's not until 8:30 back then. And so halftime hits about 11. I'm asleep. So I'm a nice, comfortable Pacific time kind of guy.
Not surprised at all. And how often do you even get to talk Miami Dolphins these days?
Never.
Probably not a lot. Right. There it is.
Absolutely never. And it's funny because it's actually kind of the spot that people forget that I was even, involved with, because it was such a quick, I was traded, 6 weeks before the season started. And that was Saban's last year, and so everybody got cleaned out after he left, and so I barely had enough time to even rent a house. So it was a pretty influential part of my career, and so it's nice to have a chance to chat.
Yeah,
we're breaking barriers here, Juice. We're breaking barriers in the Fish Tank.
We definitely are, man. I love it. All right, so let's dive right back in. Let's dive right into that Dolphins tenure, man. And after you talked about a little bit, 4 years in Detroit. The Lions grant you permission, obviously, to look for a new NFL home. And in May of 2006, you are traded to the Miami Dolphins under the tutelage and under the head coaching job of Nick Saban. The Dolphins, had to make, they had to move away from Gus Frerotte, and they made the now infamous decision to choose Dante Culpepper over Drew Brees to take over as the team's starting quarterback. What was it about Miami that was appealing to you? And that, and what were your expectations when you got here?
It was cut and dry, to be honest. I had a conversation with Nick when I was looking for a place to get traded. And he said, we traded a second round pick for Pep. We're going to trade a fifth round pick for you. I don't care what you're being paid. I don't care what he's being paid. He's going to get the first reps. You're going to get the second reps. Whoever's better is going to play. Can you deal with that? That's all I've been looking for 4 years in my career, right? I was just looking for somebody to be straightforward, to be honest, to stand by their word, right? It's people think that hearing bad news or hearing, I don't know how else to say it, hey, somebody telling you you're benched, right? That's going to be a bad thing. That's there's a fear around that, right? Oh, I don't want to be the one to deliver that news. But you know what? And you know it, OJ, as athletes, you would rather have somebody be straight up with you to say, hey, look, here's where it is. Here's where you stand. Here's where someone else stands. You've been good enough. You haven't been good enough. This is what you're doing well. This is what you can adjust. You can make changes. You can deal with that type of information. And for the first time in my career, really, Nick provided that for me, right? Came in and, Pep started the first couple games. I played the next 12. That was That was all I was looking for at that point in my career is somebody to look me in the eye, say, here's where you stand. If you do this, you will play. If you don't, you won't. And yeah, while it wasn't always the prettiest, it wasn't, inevitably we didn't end up making the playoffs, but we had a pretty good stretch going there the middle of that season, and it was because of that confidence that was instilled in me from Coach Saban and the others.
Nice. I like that, man. Man, Joe, I don't know if you know this about me, but once I finished playing, I became the biggest Dolph fan ever. Had season tickets in the first row in the end zone. And...
it's something about the outfit. I'm not really sure. Pretty ambiguous.
But yeah, man, I remember that like it was yesterday, bro, and it was crazy to see all that was going on, and yeah, I get it, man, and honestly, I don't think anybody knows. And Seth, you can back me up on this. I don't think anybody knows that was the conversation that was had between you and Nick, and the whole thing between you and Dante. That's amazing stuff, bro, right there.
Yeah, I mean, I've never heard that before till we heard it here. The perception was, because again, we always heard they had to make a choice. It was going to be Breeze, or was it going to be Dante? Was it going to be the shoulder issue, or was it going to be the knee? Like, what were they going to roll the dice on? But the conversation never, we never got that fast forward to, okay, now that Joey's here, how are we evaluating this? But, the head coach, if the head coach sits you down and tells you that, and people have said a lot of things about Nick Saban, and it's funny, Joey, we've had this running thing where I was not the biggest fan of Nick Saban, even though my boss is, like we say, kind of his son, right?
Exactly
like
right.
JT does call him daddy, and it's okay that he does, and I don't hate him for it, and it's understandable. But every guy, maybe sans Zach Thomas, that's come on this show and said, look, Nick wasn't my buddy, but man, I respected the hell out of him. And it's kind of what you said. He was straightforward. What you saw is what you got. It didn't seem like he was the kind of guy that talked out of both sides of his mouth, except for when he said he wasn't leaving. But other than that, he was.
In all honesty, I mean, and I've had people ask me this before. What would you expect him to say?
Right.
You got 4 games left to go in the season. Somebody asked him, "Are you going to be leaving to go to Alabama?" Well, yeah, I think I'm going to go. What do we do as players? And he was very. And I'm guessing part of, without Boyd, I'm not going to talk about how other people may feel or why other people may feel a certain way about him. But Nick was very much, this is my job. This is what I do. This is your job. This is what you do. And if his job is to be the head coach for the Miami Dolphins, at that point in time, what is the best thing to do to say to be the head coach for the Miami Dolphins?
There's no doubt.
I'm not going to Alabama, because the moment he says that is the moment you lose the locker room. And at that point, we were still in the playoff mix, right? And so I don't fault him for the way that he handled it. I'm sure that there were a lot of people who were frustrated about it, but when you look at that situation as a whole and what his options were, I think that was the best thing that he could have done.
Yeah. It makes sense. And look, if he
had
gone
for sure, it's the best thing he could have done, right? So
clearly, yeah. And if he had gone to Alabama, Juice, and it was a dumpster fire, we wouldn't care, right? But then he went on to be the greatest college football coach in the history of the game, and so all of us in Miami are jilted lovers. And what are you going to do? What are you going to do? All right. Well, speaking of expectations, there were serious ones surrounding the Dolphins that particular year. A big part of it was Nick Saban's reputation. He'd won the national championship. He'd come in here and things started slow, but then the Dolphins close out 2005 with 6 straight wins. And there were a lot of dudes on both sides of the ball, but the season didn't start the way anybody had hoped that it would. And the next thing you know, we're looking at that 1-3 record. Dante's still kind of dragging his knee around a little bit. I think he even did bang up his shoulder at some point. And Coach Saban decides he's going to make a change. And I don't know, we're on the outside looking in. I've heard a million stories. I certainly, guys I'm very close to, including the one who signs my paychecks, were there. But Dante felt the communication was maybe a little different than what Nick Saban felt it was. And there was this well-documented epic blow-up in practice one day. And so we've heard about all that. And I've heard it from different players. Channing Crowder tells a great version of the story. Who knows if it's true or not, but it's a great version of the story. But when all this shit's going on, Joey, like, what I would love to hear from your perspective, like, because you told us what he told you coming in, but you're the guy who's like, okay, next man up, and a football decision was made, and you can't get caught up in that. You got to go out there and lead this football team now. I'm just curious, with all of that madness, even in the moment and what you were told beforehand, and I would just love to hear your perspective as to how all that went down.
I'm going to start by asking what you know, or what has.
This is a smart. We're dealing with a quarterback, Juice.
This is new to me. I have never told my version of what happened on that Friday practice.
Right.
On a nationally syndicated, I mentioned it to a few people, and it's like, all right, this isn't really going to get out, because if it did, like, ooh. So what do you know specifically about what may or may not have happened on that Friday afternoon practice?
Sure. Well, from what I understand, Dante went out to practice that day believing he was the starting quarterback of the Miami Dolphins. And Nick Saban was ready to start practice, and in his mind, Joey Harrington was the starting quarterback of the Miami Dolphins. And Dante didn't take it very well, and the two of them spoke to each other like two angry grown men do speak to each other in typically not in the workplace. So those are, without cutting too deep into it, everything that we've been told was Dante felt that Nick either didn't tell him or told him something that was different than what was delivered that day at practice. And he was, I'm sure his pride was hit, but he was also pissed and felt betrayed. And a lot of expletives were thrown out. And that's what we know.
I'm not going to ever speak for other people. I'm just
fair.
What your knowledge of the events that may or may not, the words that may or may not have been shared.
Yeah.
The physical, like how, we don't necessarily. Okay, here we go.
and just to clarify my question, I'm not asking so you could tell me Dante said this to Nick and Nick said that to Dante. I kind of want, there's a third party in this thing, and it's the other guy that has to now go be because that's got to be a little bit odd. In most jobs in America, when you get a job, it's because someone else left or someone else was fired or whatever, but you don't have to then go sit next to the guy in the cubicle whose job you just took, and he and his boss or your boss are MFing each other. Like that's not a normal thing that happens. And so the reason I asked the question is to get the perspective from the third party in all of this, who now has all of that looming over, like, oh shit, like I just, I just came from a dysfunctional situation, and now I got this chance to go be the best version of me, and all of this stuff is happening around me. So that's the question.
If you guys wanted to talk about dysfunction, you came to the right guy. A whole career of
outstanding.
Okay, my understanding of the situation. Dante, like you said, having knee issues. And coach said to him, and he said to us as a quarterback group, Jason Garrett was there. Look, if you're having issues, take the week off, go to your treatment. Joey's going to take all the reps. We got to Friday, and there wasn't a clear, definitive, decision on what his health was. So Coach Saban said, we have to get Joey ready to play on Sunday. In a 10-period practice, Joey's going to take the first 5, you're going to take the second 5. That was the understanding coming out. Boo, we go out to start practice. I start jogging out to the huddle, and I see Pep coming in, and so I start jogging backwards like, nope, we're not we're not doing this. The events happen, and it was surreal. I mean, there's no other word to really describe it. Like those type of altercations aren't normal workplace environment, normal workplace occurrences, right? So as somebody who has to do their job still, I don't know. I mean, it didn't really change anything for me. right? I think that's the best way to describe it, because at that point in my career, I'd seen some crazy stuff. That was kind of just another like, whoa, never seen that before.
Right.
All right,
Add that to the list. Yeah.
right, and now we move on, which is again kind of like to the point I was making earlier. It's like, as an athlete, you're able to compartmentalize. You're able to say, this is what I can control, this is what I can't control. This is what I do well, this is what I need to work on. This is what I have to do now, this is what I can save for later, right? Those are the things that as an athlete you're able to deal with. For me, in that situation, I don't know. You just kind of say next man up, right? This is my opportunity to go play. Did I necessarily expect it to happen that way? No, I didn't.
Right.
But I knew, based on how we came out of, like I said, the conversations that Nick and I had coming into the season, the way that Pep and I had come out of training camp, essentially in kind of like a, 1A, 1B kind of way, I knew that it was a possibility. And that week of practice, we had been preparing for that to be the case. The fact that I became the starter and played the next 10, 12 games wasn't a surprise to me. The way in which all the other stuff happened around it was.
Right.
Is that a fair answer?
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a great answer.
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
It's the one component that we haven't heard. Now, we haven't had Pep on the show yet, and it's crazy, in 5 years. And obviously, if and when we would get his perspective, we kind of heard from everybody else around it and then what was reported. But like I said, you were the third party in this, and so
the most important of the three, Big Seth, right? I mean,
well, it certainly became that way, right?
Yeah,
because
he's
the guy who's going to touch the ball now for every flip and play for the rest of the season. And so the last question I have for you regarding that whole scenario, to the extent that you want to share, and I hope it's a positive answer, but like, you came from an environment where you weren't overwhelmingly supported by your teammates towards the end, right? And I think I've read that. And so how, clearly Dante Culpepper was very upset, and his issue was with Nick Saban. Did you ever feel any of that projected towards you, or were you just able to show up and do your job and you guys were okay, but there was an issue with management?
Oh, I got nothing with Pep. He is his own man, and I understand, if that was his understanding of the situation, I'd be frustrated too. The one thing I will say, I will never forget, it was a preseason game, but it continued on, the entire year. God, I think I fumbled a snap. It was one of those things, new center, new team, you're in the preseason trying to figure it out. And I fumbled a snap in a preseason game. And I came off the sideline. And for a whole host of reasons, this was pretty much the lowest time of my career, those months coming into Miami, that first part of, the time in Miami. And it wasn't just, there was all sorts of things that we don't need to, dive into.
I like that. Dive into. I like that. It's perfect.
It's kind of our thing here in the Fish Tank. We love to dive
into stuff.
we can dive. But I walked off the sideline, and Kevin Carter grabbed me and looked at me, and he grabbed me by the shoulders. He said, "Look, I don't care what just happened, and I don't care how your teammates treated you where you came from. But here we've got each other's back. We've got your back. We're going to go get this football back for you."
Love that.
And sure enough, they went out and caused a fumble and got the ball back. And Kevin Carter comes over and is like, "You're good. Like, we got you here." Between him, Zach, Jason, there were so many vets on that team. Guys that were good, not just incredible football players, but good, strong leaders, good people, good, like, men of character. That was a really refreshing change for me. and very impactful at that time. My relationship with the rest of that team was nothing but supportive. Right? Every single one of them, whether it was, a young Channing Crowder or, the old, God, Big Daddy Wilkinson was still on that team and, coming in with his briefcase, and like, every single one of the guys in that locker room was incredibly supportive. And that wasn't something that I had experienced to that point.
No doubt. And we're going to talk about, how that season pretty much unfolded, man. But let's talk about a few of the guys that were on the roster. You talk about some guys on the defense side of the football. Let's talk about some of the guys that, you had on the offensive side of the ball, man. I mean, hell, at my favorite position, you had three guys that I freaking love, man. Chris Chambers and Marty Booker and a young Wes Walker back then, who was just a season away from becoming one of the greatest all-time pretty much slot receivers in my opinion. Then you throw in Randy McMichael at tight end, Ronnie Brown in the backfield. Tell us what you remember about that offensive side of the football, and then we'll talk a little bit more probably about the defensive side.
Okay. A couple things that stick out to me. One, I remember looking at Wes in training camp and being like, all right, I think this kick returner, what? Free agent? You got cut from some, okay. I think I'm going to throw this guy the ball a little bit more. He can be pretty good. I also remember thinking that Chris Chambers was one of the most talented wide receivers I'd ever seen in my life. And I wanted him to be a Keyshawn. I wanted him to say, throw me the damn ball. Like, I wanted him to get up on third down and come over and grab me and be like, I don't care who's across from me. I'm going to be 12 yards down on the sideline. You cut that thing loose and I'm going to go get it. But that wasn't his personality, right?
Nope.
So we had this really interesting mix of a Randy McMichael, who was that personality, who would tell you, all right.
Randy was okay in that game.
You were covered, man. Like, you were slow. Like, come on, you're big and strong, but you're slow. You ain't getting loose. Wow, shut up. Give me the ball. And then you had the old vet, Marty Booker, who was like, that dude's still got some life in him. Like, he's still got some, like, I never knew Book. I thought of him in Chicago, and I was like, man, this guy's talented. And then you got Chris, who was just kind of so quiet and reserved and just had all the talent in the world. And then you had this like little engine that just like never stopped running, but had this incredible feel for the game. So like we had this really interesting mesh of guys who were incredibly talented in their own ways, but nobody who was truly like the guy. Nobody who was like the Julio Jones or, the Megatron or the, pick your guy, tight end, Gronk. That like we had a lot of really, really good players. And I think you'll see, if I'm not mistaken, I think we had all four of those guys or maybe over 60 catches that year. We thrown a couple running backs that, I think we had 4 or 5 guys over 55, 60 catches that. And that really spoke to that, where it was like, man, every single one of these guys can do it, but nobody is really grabbing it and saying like, this is
yeah.
This is mine, and everybody else fall in line. Which, it's funny. I never really played with a guy like that. So I hear people talk about, it's 3rd and 6. You're looking right to this receiver. I never had that.
Interesting.
I had guys where it was, I know they were going to get open and snap of the ball, cover 2. Okay, that, I got cloud on the outside. I'm working in, backer slides this way. This dictates I go here, as opposed to saying, where is my wideout? I'm going there. Like there was a difference between playing with that one type of guy versus playing with this group of players that were they were all really, really, really good. But nobody was the Hall of Famer.
The guy.
Yeah,
It's
it was
really
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wonder. Well, a couple things I think of while you're saying all that. One, Juice, you needed to go give them a pep talk because he would have found a way to tell him that. Right?
Yeah.
He would have found a way to tell him how that's supposed to look.
Damn
But I
right.
wonder, I almost wish you had played with that guy so you'd have that perspective to compare it to, right? Because it sounds like, and then the last thing is you were spot the heck on. It was 20 years ago, but Chambers had 59 receptions, Book had 55, Wes had 67, and Randy Mack had 62. Yeah,
Right.
man. Exactly what you said.
Yeah, they were all right in, and it was. You asked how did I like playing in that offense? I remember a couple games where we just got into shotgun and empty sets, and it was Mike Malarkey, and we would just boom, hey, ball's in your hands. You're going where you see it. We're going no huddle. Those were the times when I felt most comfortable because I knew that every single one of those spots out there, they could get open. Hey, coverage dictates ball goes here, ball goes there. Randy McMichael's ready. Coverage dictates ball goes here. Wes Welker, there you go. Like that was what was so great about playing with guys like that is I had come from a place where, Charles Rogers was supposed to be the guy and he got hurt the first 2 years and, things did not go the way I think anybody would have hoped for Charles. Roy was, the next guy we drafted. He did well. Mike Williams was the next guy we drafted in Detroit, and he barely, saw the field. So there was always like a guy and then kind of some also rans, right? In Miami, it was guy. And it was all the way across. And so there was a level of comfort that I felt just sitting back there in shotgun. I was like, yeah, kind of like this.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna tell you what. I mean, Wes Welker heard what you were talking about as he went on, years after that, having 110 plus grabs. He said, he might not have heard you say that, Joey, but getting 110 plus grabs 5 out of the next 6 years afterwards was like, yeah, I'm the guy. I'm the freaking guy that Joey was looking for.
The funny thing is, he played even in that system. He wasn't the guy because they had Randy Moss outside,
Exactly
right? That was. I ran into Wes. I ran into Wes at the combine a couple weeks ago for the first time since almost 20 years, right? Since 06, 07. And we talked about talking with the young receivers and talking with the young, the college guys coming out in the draft. And it's like, how do you find a niche? How do you find a way to fit in this league? Because people think of Wes Welker and 110 catches, but what they don't think about is he ran a 4.6. He didn't get invited to the combine. He ran 4.6 at his pro day. He ended up as a free agent in San Diego. Was there for a cup of coffee before ended up in Miami. But the thing that was so great about Wes was his incredible work ethic, but his understanding of the game, right? His understanding of where to be and why to be there. This is where I have to be. This is when I have to be there, and this is why I have to be there. And that's the difference between me giving him 65 balls and Tom giving him 110. Tom was a little bit better than me. Let's call a spade here. But
okay.
He was able to take advantage and really utilize Wes for what he was. Because, God, when you put a guy like that inside of a guy like Randy Moss, what do you do?
Yes.
What do you do to possibly stop him?
Exactly right.
Absolutely crazy.
Exactly right.
And it's what also is interesting, and maybe this again. You're clearly playing certain things close to the vest that are other people's conversations, which I respect. But Chris on this show told us how when he reflects back on his career, he wished that he had been more of the guy that was a little bit more outspoken and a little bit more that he's like, man, everyone talks about how nice I am and I appreciate it, but damn it, I wish I had a little bit more, loud asshole in me, quite frankly, because maybe I could have maximized my career differently. And he also said that Coach Saban pulled him into he had so much appreciation for Coach Saban because he pulled him into the office one day and he's like, if you're not the best version of you, we can't win. And he's like, I need you to step up. And he was kind of shocked to hear that because it was a team that had these giants in JT and Zach and all the guys you mentioned earlier. And that was empowering for him. So those are kind of the things that I've heard on this show that have made me look at Nick Saban differently. but Chris said he took that with him the rest of his career.
I will never forget, we were playing at the Jets, and we're down maybe 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. And just kind of how it played out, we started making a comeback. And the way it played out is, hey, Chris started getting a lot of these balls here in the fourth quarter. And he made a catch. He made a catch in the end zone, front corner, that it was one of those moments where it was like, oh my God. Like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
And every once in a while, those moments would just like pop out. And that was one that that sticks out for me. We were on our sideline. We were going that way. It was the far front corner in the end zone over there. God, and then it would he'd kind of shrink back a little bit.
Interesting.
Right? I think a lot of us wanted him to take that and, come back to the huddle and hand me the ball and say, you see that? I'll do that every damn play if you get it to me. I was like, great, sweet, I'd love to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure that there are plenty of things that people could say to me, 20 years later would say to me, but I don't mean that to be a criticism, but more of just a praise of how incredibly talented he was and how interesting it is to reflect, 10, 20 years later and say, God, I probably would have done that a little bit differently.
Yeah. I like I said, I don't think he'd argue with you.
Right.
So, well, I will dive back into the season, and it'd be great if there was a magic wand and you stepped in and it was this, this fairy tale, but it didn't start out that way. We drop another 3 in a row as you're kind of getting command of the offense. If you go back and study it, Juice, I was looking at it, like the average points per game started to climb up, even though it took us a few weeks to get a win, but we went from like averaging 12 or 13 points a game to averaging 16, 17. And so you started to see some progress, but then we're 1-6 and you guys are heading up to Chicago and the Bears are 7-0, and nobody in the entire friggin' planet that has any sense about them gives the Dolphins any chance. But you guys go in there and just beat the brakes off of
the hell out of,
which becomes the catalyst for this 4-game win streak, a run of 5 out of 6 games. As you said, late in the season, part of the reason why Nick Saban couldn't say anything other than what he did is because there was still a chance to make the playoffs there. What do you remember specifically from that game against the Chicago Bears? And then what do you think started to click for you guys?
It's funny. You mentioned that we lost 3 straight when I started. I didn't remember that because I remember going up to Boston. I remember going up to New England. It was a pretty close game, if I remember. I remember that one. God, and I almost sometimes think that we won that game. But yeah, I do.
Probably more fun to remember it that way.
Yeah, exactly. I'll come back to that point. Actually, circle back on this. Okay, I'm going to focus on your question, and then we'll come back to something else. What do I remember about that? I remember the defense just being incredible. I mean, I really do. They were. I was so lucky as a quarterback who was trying to just get my feet under me to be able to have a defense like that. And pick a guy, go down the list, Coach Saban, whatever it is, Jason won Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah.
He was pretty dang good. I remember getting set up by the defense a couple times and then bam, touchdown. Get set up by the defense, bam, touchdown. Right. And before you look, and it was one of those things where it was like, before you could kind of take a deep breath and look back, it was like, oh, like we got him on the ropes here. Like it was almost I'm trying to think of what the word would be. Like there were moments in that stretch where you looked at it and saw and said, oh, that's what we could have been. Like, oh, like, okay, if we can get an off season, or if we could have had hey, let's get a piece, let's kind of figure this. But it was like we've talked about, there were a lot of things moving at that time. But there were moments when you saw it and it's like, that's how good we could be. And then whether it was the next week or the next half, like you look at it and say, oh man, we suck.
That's got to be fun.
Oh God. I remember walking off the field at Buffalo. And I think that was, the only time I had like a 0.0 passing rating in it was windy and it was, whatever. Like, and I walk off and Nick Saban looks at me. He's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Why are you, stop. What, is something wrong? Like, why are you so bad? Just run to him." And I was like, I don't know, coach, I'm trying. And he looks at Jason Garrett. He's like, "Why is he doing this?"
Damn.
Somebody needed to have an answer.
I was like, I'm trying to fix it, man. So you had the complete polar opposites of like 1 minute, it's like, we can't even tie our shoes. Well, I couldn't even tie my shoes. And on the other side, it's like, oh, bam, everything is clicking. Chicago, Detroit, like you can list like, 3 or 4 games where it was like pop, 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 pop. New England at home. That's the one that I was thinking of. Like, and I tell my kids, so Jack is 15 and Emmett is 12 now, but when they were little and you're reading them stories like, "All right, hey, time to tuck you in. All right, good night. God bless you. Daddy loves you. Don't ever forget that your dad beat Tom Brady." All right.
Make sure he knows. That's right. I love that.
That is too good. So you mentioned it briefly just now. Thanksgiving in Detroit. You know what I mean? So here you are, Lions former number 3 overall pick. And, you just spent, 4 difficult years there. And now you're headed back in the Ford Field on Thanksgiving, bro. We're on a 3-game winning streak and the drama's high. Tell us what you remember. I know you remember a lot. You have to remember a lot. Tell us what you remember from the week leading up to the game and obviously the game itself where you balled out, bro. And just, some high level, just tell us what you remember from that whole experience. It had to be unbelievable for you.
I honestly don't remember much of the week leading up to it. I don't. My memories around it start during player introductions. Coach Saban had, you go on the road and you choose, hey, are they going to do starting lineups for offense or defense? I'm sure for this very reason, and because our defense was incredible, Saban says, all right, starting lineups are going to be for defense. So they go through, we're lined up, all the offensive guys, right, are lined up on the field. All the defensive guys come running out of the tunnel, and Zach and Jason and Kevin Carter, all right, great. They get through all of them. And then they start playing Billy Joel in the back, or like on the big screen. And I kind of look over and I see images of me getting sacked.
Wow.
And like ear hold while Piano Man, they start playing Piano Man.
Of course, it's Piano Man, right.
And so, and it's probably 5-10 seconds of me just getting my teeth kicked in. And then I hear, "And welcome back, starting quarterback." And
wow.
And one of my, Justin Peel, he and I played at Oregon together, and he was Randy's backup at tight end. We were on that team together, and he kind of grabbed me and he looked, and we kind of start laughing. He was like, "Damn, you made a hell of an impression here." They went out of their way to introduce the defense and then personally introduce me with, Billy Joel, Piano Man, because I never did understand why in Motown, of all places, like the city that celebrates music, they had a hard time understanding
right.
That piano. Like, whatever, like maybe we raise some money for anyway. But so we go out and it started out, were we down 14-0? We were down, they came out quick. And I remember thinking like, oh, damn, like not this. And then things just started to click and click. And about midway through the second quarter, we just went pop, 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 pop. Book had one. Randy had one. And honestly, like you get into those zones and you hear it where you just feel comfortable. And maybe it was because I'd played there for 4 years, or maybe it was because, I just wanted to flip the bird to everybody in the stands for,
For
And that's
obvious
okay.
reasons.
and
For
that's
obvious reasons.
yeah. But I kind of slid into that zone in through the third quarter, and we built up a lead. It's funny. You look at the stats. I ended up throwing 3 touchdowns that day, which fine, great. It was good. But one of the reporters said to me afterwards, you only threw for like 220 yards. Why is this such a big deal? And
Jeez.
and then somebody, I can't remember who it was, slides a stat sheet over and says, "You guys didn't throw a pass in the fourth quarter." I was like, "Oh, well, we threw for 220 and 3 touchdowns, but we didn't have to throw the ball in the fourth.
Right.
We ran it every single play because we were beating your ass so much." Like, yeah, all right, cool. I felt pretty good. The funny thing, okay, I know I've told this to plenty of people, but I don't know if it's gotten back to Miami. So we go Thanksgiving, right? Played on Thursday. And from the years in Detroit, I knew that there was a direct nonstop from Detroit back to Portland after the game. And so Coach Saban's like, yeah, you can take off. I went back. The team flew back to Miami. I flew back to Portland, be with family, be with my fiance, now wife, Emily, and flew back in time, for practice the next week. I get back to the facility, and on my stool in my locker, there's a FedEx envelope. And it's from somewhere in the Hamptons. I was like, who do I know in New York? So I open it up and take it out. And there's a letter that says, "Dear Mr. Harrington, my name is so-and-so. I'm the personal assistant for Billy Joel. Enclosed, you will find a note from Mr. Joel." Pull it out, and sure enough, like on stationery, William Joel. And, "Dear Joey, this is Billy Joel. I heard that they used my song to introduce you at the Detroit Lions game on Thanksgiving. I've just moved to, I would be honored if you wanted to use my music as an intro for any of your games down the road. I've just moved to Miami and would, love to get together and,
how good is that?
After the off season. P.S. Maybe Detroit should use my song, 'We Didn't Start the Fire,' as their."
That is so good.
I was like, all right, cool, good.
That is so, do you still have that letter?
I still have the letter.
You gotta
yeah,
keep that, right?
Cut, like right after the off season, so I never got a chance to.
But the letter is forever, though.
The letter's forever. The letter is still there. Yeah.
Oh man! Wow,
Oh, man.
That had to be great. That had to be great.
Enjoy that. And honestly, that game had to be probably the most gratifying game of a career when you have an opportunity to go in there and, and stick it to the team that really didn't give you the best opportunity to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, for a long time I was bitter. I mean, I'll be honest. Like I was bitter for a long time. And at a certain point, OJ, you just say, like, what's the point? Like, why are you holding on to this? Was it arguably if I look back at my career, which isn't full of, 0 playoff games and, like it wasn't exactly the picture of excellence. That game is probably the most meaningful, but I think less so for wanting to stick it to him, right? And more so now just as a representation that, I can do this.
Yep.
I could do that.
Yep.
Right? Because that's a part of, I touched on it a little bit. When I got to Miami, that was as low as I had been in my lifetime. I mean, in a whole host of areas and for a whole variety of reasons. I was doubting myself. I was, struggling with self-worth. I was, do you deserve to be here? Who are you if you're not a football player anymore? Like, you've just gotten run out of town and, your job was to go and save this team and you failed and you're a failure and, don't show your face in public. Like there was some stuff going on. And to look back and know, like, yeah, was I always the best? No, I wasn't. But for a time in my life, I was one of the 32 best people in the world at what I did.
Yeah.
Right? There's 32 starting quarterbacks in this world. And for more than half a decade, I was one of the 32 best people in the world at my job. And that's something.
Absolutely.
There's got to be power in that.
Absolutely. There aren't too many people in any profession that can say that. Right? So was it nice to go stick it to them? Sure. And there was gratification, when I was still bitter and angry, like there was, that was gratifying. But I think I've moved to a point where it's like, hey, life happens, right? That's, you go in trying to do the best you can. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And in that case, it didn't. And honestly, like that experience has helped me so much as I've gotten older personally and in the way that I raise my kids. Yeah. So it's an interesting kind of two-pronged. Was it awesome to go back and beat the brakes off them? Yeah, it was. It was pretty cool. But at the same time, it's like, I think it was just more of it solidified for me that this is something I can do.
Yep. So good.
So
man. That's so good.
Yeah, and I'm listening to this, Joey, and I there's something that Mike McDaniel, Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel says. He said it a bunch of times in his tenure here, and it's always caught my attention because I've never really heard anybody say it as obvious as you would think it would be. But he talks about just how people can't fully understand or appreciate the level of pressure that is and expectations that are placed upon first round draft picks, just and especially the higher you are in that first round, if you're that top 15, top 10, and especially at your position.
Right.
Like he's like, look, we're in a pressure packed business. This is a results oriented business. We understand it, the way it works, but there's something unique to being drafted. And I give Juice a hard time all the time about being a first round pick.
Somebody
but so I'm coming from a different perspective on this.
It's great.
Well, but I'm coming from a different perspective. As much as I bust your chops, is that it's really interesting to hear Mike McDaniel say that. And then you look at guys like what happened with Sam Darnold, who was like you, 3rd overall, I think, his year. Baker Mayfield was drafted number 1 overall that year. Zach Wilson's with the Dolphins now, looking for this other opportunity to show that he can be a certain type of player or find whatever that thing is that you found in yourself once you left Detroit. And again, I just think, and maybe you just kind of shared it, but how much do you think it's important when guys are in that situation and things don't go the way everybody planned, and they do have the weight of an entire franchise on their shoulders, that just getting some to wear a different color laundry and be in a different space, like how much does that give you an opportunity to kind of breathe and maybe find some semblance of yourself that was there before you went through all that shit?
It helps to change laundry, but what you hope, and I think what you have to, the key in all of it is that you're not broken by the time you get to that point. And that's what it was for me is I was broken. I mean, I was a shell of who I was 4 years prior when I got to Miami. I mean, looking over your shoulder. I remember telling Coach Garrett, like, you don't need me here. Like, why am I even here? Like, you don't need me. Like, why do you want me? Like, I was able to rebuild to a point where I could be competent. Right? I was a competent starting quarterback for the Dolphins. I was a competent starting quarterback for the Falcons. But I was coming from such a place of brokenness that I had no chance to get back to, a place like Sam Darnold or to see what Baker Mayfield has done. You don't. You don't understand. The general public cannot understand. And frankly, a lot of guys in the locker room can't understand what it's like to have that type of pressure put on your shoulders. And I had lived it for a couple years prior. When I was in college, they took my picture and put it on a 10-story billboard, kitty corner from Madison Square Garden. I tell people I had the first Instagram post. I got 1 million views a day. It was right at the top.
That's right. That's right. Wow.
And people either loved it or you hated it, right? And had we gone 7-5 that year, it would have been the biggest flop in history. But instead, we went 11-1, and we put Oregon on the national map. And I played 30 games in college, and we won 27 of them. Like, I had come from this place of just like build upon build upon build upon build. And so that pressure it became like football became who I was. Like, it became my identity. It became everything about me. And so when it came crashing down, it was this, I never dealt with that type of failure. I'd never, you deal with adversity in a quarterback competition, right? Quarterback A and quarterback B, you fight it out. You have a bad day, you have a good day, you figure it out, you go play, right? But when you walk off the plane in Detroit for the first time, I was literally walking off the jetway and into the terminal, and a guy looks at me, is like, "Oh, Joey, hey, welcome to Detroit. You've got one of the two toughest jobs in the city, goalie for the Red Wings and quarterback for the Lions. And we haven't had a quarterback here since Bobby Lane in 1954. Hey, don't worry, the fate of this city rests on your shoulders. Good luck." That was the first thing anybody said to me. And I loved it because I'd only had those positive experiences leading up to it.
So you're like, I got this.
Yeah, I got this. How great is it going to be for me to turn around an entire city? Man, this is incredible. Oh my God. Okay, here we go. First year, rookie starting quarterback. Hey, we're going to have our bumps. Okay, we end up 3-13. Great, we draft Charles. Okay, here we go. Charles comes in. He and I have 4 touchdowns in 6 games. He breaks his collarbone. Okay, right. Now we're going to draft Roy, and everything's going to be good. He's going to pair him other side of Charles. Charles breaks his collarbone again. Okay, let's draft Mike to replace him. And Mike had been out of the league for a year because, hadn't been eligible for the draft. And it was this series of things that all kind of played into each other, but inevitably gets put onto the quarterback. You didn't do your job. And like you hinted at, with teammates in Detroit and not really being very supportive, that ended up in, teammates going on SportsCenter and saying, it's Joey's fault, we're terrible. When your entire being and your entire reason for living, because that's what it is, right? Being a starting quarterback in the NFL is truly all encompassing. You eat it, you sleep it, you drink it. Every decision you make around your life is based on that job. Do I go skiing with my family? Nah, I might get hurt. Do I go out to dinner or have that extra? Nah, because, I might get put in a compromising situation. Like, literally everything you do is around this. And so when you have failed so publicly, and not just publicly, but in a way that, like, your teammates, like, the locker room is supposed to be sacred. The locker room turns on you publicly. When you feel like, my reason for being on this earth is like going away, and I have not just disappointed, but I have like let down an entire city of people. Yeah, that has a way of wrecking you, right? So Mike is right. Like, the level of, and whether people mean to do it or not, whether it's inadvertent, like, the level of pressure that exists as a starting quarterback in the NFL is something that very few people, will ever have to deal with in their lifetime.
And Joey, man, I say this all the time, and Seth will attest to this, man. the most important position in all of sports, the most criticized position in all of sports is NFL quarterback. You can look at
Mhm.
any other sport. There could be the best shooting guard for basketball. There could be the best shortstop in baseball. It could be the guy, but the freaking quarterback position is so critical in the sport. In the sport of football, obviously. And man, I was just like, I was reading something, and what you're saying is so powerful. But I think you realize when you got to Miami that fucking football is not going to define Joey Harrington. That's what I was reading. It's not going to define you, man. And I had to have to imagine that was really fulfilling for you to like think about. All this football is great. You talk about not going skiing. You talk about not want to go out in public for the most part, but it did not define you who you are, Joey Harrington, right?
It doesn't now, but at the time it did.
It
I had a
did,
hard
of
time.
course.
Yeah. I mean, that was, and frankly, that's part of the reason why I ended up just walking away, you know, after all the experiences, the stuff in Detroit and thinking I was getting my feet back under in Miami, and then Nick left and I ended up in Atlanta and thinking, okay, who's the most stable quarterback in the league? All right, let's go be Mike Vick's backup. And then I was like, well, that didn't go so well. And, then like, it was literally like this one after another. And I got to the point and I was like, no, thanks. Like, there are other things in life that are more important than playing professional football. And I'm relatively healthy. I'm relatively young. Just had my first son. Like, let's go home. But it took me a while, so what, that was 06 when I got to Miami and kind of really started figuring that stuff out. And then I hung it up in 09. But it took me a few years to really figure that out and say, you know what? There's more to it than chucking a leather oval around on Sundays.
Doubt about it. That thing is just, people don't realize how hard it is to do that, man. I was talking to somebody the other day, like, as a wide receiver, I didn't care what the offensive line was doing. As an offensive line, they didn't care what the wide receivers were doing. But the quarterback has to worry about what the hell everybody else is doing. People don't get all the shit that the quarterback has to deal with. You know what I mean? It's like, so yeah, man. It's tough, man. But anyhow, man, we're keeping you long, bro. We're gonna move on right here a little bit, Joey. And we definitely appreciate all the time that you put in with us so far, man. But before we knock out our final segment, I think you'll appreciate and do very well in our final segment. But tell us about your tell us about your foundation, man, and your event that's coming up, because it looks like it's going to be, a lot of fun. And, I think I need to start getting my swing together, man.
You'll be getting your welcome email. I was working on my welcome email before I hopped on the show here. So
wait, you actually do the welcome email?
Man, I do. It's the Harrington Family Foundation.
That's what I'm talking about.
It's just me.
Wow.
OJ will see, he'll see, it's just me and my cousin running. We just run it.
I love it.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's funny. The Harrington Family Foundation actually started when I got drafted. So I took my signing bonus and started the foundation, knowing that at some point in my life, I would want to do something philanthropic. When you're 23, you don't know what that is. You don't know what it looks like. You don't. So we started by just giving small grants to anybody who applied. We built a science lab in a Southeast Portland, grade school. We gave soccer balls to kids in Uganda. We literally did everything.
Right.
So I retired and I said, you know what? I'm going to run my foundation. Went to the president of a bank who'd been supportive of us and helped with a fundraiser concert. And I was like, all right, Brian, let's do it. Let's do this foundation thing. And he looked at me and he said, and I come in not knowing exactly what I was pitching. And he said, Joey, I love your passion. I love your commitment to this city and this state. But if you're telling me that the money I give to you, you're just going to turn around and give it to Boys and Girls Club, why wouldn't I just give it to Boys and Girls Club?
Yep.
I was like, you got a point. I don't have an answer. I'll call you in 6 months. So I went back to the drawing board and I said, all right, what is it that defines me? What is it when people think of the Harrington Family Foundation? What are they going to think of? They're going to think of me. I was a quarterback. A quarterback is a position of leadership. left Oregon for a while. I came back. I'm from here. I'm invested here. So I came up with this idea of the community quarterback. Be a quarterback in your community. And so what we do is we give 5 $25,000 college scholarships to graduating high school seniors from around the state based on financial need and community leadership. No grades, no test scores. No, I don't care if if you've only got a 3.6 because you weren't into Henry David Thoreau and you got a C in your high school English class. Who cares? Maybe you're passionate about social justice and you are every weekend volunteering with some organization out in the community. We look for those students who may get looked over because they don't have perfect grades or they didn't get a 1,600 on their SATs, but are still incredibly invested in building our community. So we find those students from all over the state. And the other part is giving them access, and whether it's financial access, whether it's, they have a lack of access because of geographic reasons, we connect them with mentors throughout the state to help open doors. And it's not like, OJ, I'm calling you. You doing your homework? Did you get your test done? Not that type of mentorship. It's more of just creating a network that the students know that we're there for them. Hey, I'm looking for something in this space, engineering, architecture in the summer. Is there someone that you guys might be able to help connect me with? Oh yeah, absolutely. Let me give you a call. Let's go have coffee. And the best part, honestly, guys, is we've been doing this for 12 years now. And every year we've had 16 students. We just upped to 5 scholarships. So previously we had four freshmen, 4 juniors, 4 seniors, 4 freshmen, 4 sophomores, 4 juniors, 4 seniors, 16 students in school all around the state. And they don't have to go to U of O. They can go to Oregon State. Frankly, we have one at Rogue Community College. You can go to art school. We are truly trying to build the next generation of leaders. But as they graduate, they go off. We've had students that have gone back to DC that have worked, as clerks or interns, in Congress, and then come back and say, hey, Joey, how can I help? Well, how you can help is you could start, let's go ahead and run for office in your community and then come to dinner. Come to our family dinners. So now they get established in their careers and they start coming back and have just started coming back and say, how can I help your current students?
That's the best.
So what we're doing is we're building a network of people who care about their community, who care about Oregon, who want to go out and share their gifts and then come back and help other people get to the point where they are. So, it's really fulfilling work. To be able to look around, we've got our scholarship dinner coming up. We've just closed our application period and we're going to start review here this week for this next year. But to look around at our scholarship dinner in May and see the community that we've put together of people who, by all means, we are not the same. We got people from inner city Portland. We got, people from rural Central Oregon, Southern Oregon coast, but we're all invested in the same place. And that's a really cool thing to see, a group of people that come together that have all decided that they want to help each other make our home better.
Love it.
Yes, that's awesome. Yes, that's awesome. Juice, you better start loosening up that back, man.
Yeah.
Get it going.
Kijana's going to carry me.
There you go. Yeah, he'll be ready. He'll definitely be ready. Well, great stuff. As Juice alluded to, we do have this last segment, and then we'll get you out of here because you probably got more than you bargained for with us.
No stress.
But you shouldn't have been so damn interesting. We could have just breezed right through this thing. So the reason he said he thinks you're going to do fine on this last segment is we end every episode of the podcast the same way. It's our fish tank 2-minute drill.
Okay,
historically, the quarterbacks, they usually do pretty good in the 2-minute drill. We're going to put 2 minutes on the clock. You can, just keep that in the back of your head. If you think you need a timeout, you can call it. We'll give you a timeout if you need it. If you don't want it, we'll take it.
We got to ask you first. Do you need the timeout, Joe? You think you need a timeout?
I don't even know what we're talking about.
He's a pragmatic guy, Juice. I think he's going to keep the timeout. If we're offering it, he's going to keep it.
Is this 17th century literature or world geography?
No. We're not going to stump you.
It's all about Joey Harrington.
It's Joey Harrington stuff. Yeah, you should be an expert in this particular field for sure. So, all right, let's have some fun. 2 minutes, Juice, you're up. Clock is running.
All right, Joe, here we go. You are a proud alumnus of Central Catholic High School in Portland, Oregon. Do you know what other former Miami Dolphin quarterback also attended a Central Catholic High School just in another state?
Dan Marino, state of Pennsylvania.
Boom, there it is.
All right, that's a good start. Here we
Keep it moving. Look at that. Yeah, first down. Here we go. All right, it is well documented, and we talked about it earlier. You're an accomplished pianist, and you have played in some really cool shows. Forget your favorite football moment. What is your favorite moment that you've ever had playing the piano?
We hosted a fundraiser concert I talked about earlier at the Crystal Ballroom here in Portland. It was with Blues Traveler and Jason Mraz, and I got to sit down and play for about a 30-minute set on the encore with all of them, and then that was recorded and put on Monday Night Football.
Rock star right there.
Oh, Seth, I know we got the clock is running, man, but I played saxophone.
Are you going to call a timeout?
I played saxophone growing up, and all I could play was Happy Birthday, man. This dude was playing, and so it's a whole different world right there.
A 30-minute set. Yeah, like you could get away if you know how to play chopsticks or something, but 30 minutes is going to expose you. You better be the real deal. Keep it moving. All right, clock is running.
As a whiteout for life, guys at my position, live by the motto, look good, feel good, play good. No team in sports, obviously, you know this, no team in sports more fits that than the Oregon Ducks. You guys are what you guys do. But what is Joey Harrington's favorite uniform combination?
Ooh. Well, obviously it has to be the original green helmet. That's what I'm going to say. Our first, because my sophomore year is when we switched to the iridescent green with the yellow O. But we only had one uniform. We had a home uniform and an away uniform. Like people think we were just changing. That's all it was. So uniform combination.
It's hard, man. It's gotta be hard for you.
Penn State's easy, Juice, right?
Real easy for us.
Hold on, the Rose Bowl that Oregon played against Wisconsin in 2009. It was what do they call it? Like liquid chrome with the wings down, and DeAnthony Thomas hits a kick return and just boom, boom, wham, and he takes off up the sideline. And as he's going down, the game in Pasadena is always played at 2 o'clock kickoff. So the sunset, that you could see the sunset reflecting off of the hills in his helmet as he's going down the sideline. It's like that is the moment of the pure Oregon football uniform for me. So that's the uniforms they wore in that Rose Bowl.
Hard to top it. All right, here we go. We're in the red zone. Final question. If Wikipedia is accurate,
it's
pro
not.
golfer. Okay. I mean, that just as a blanket statement. But pro golfer Patrick Harrington is a distant cousin, potentially. Mm-hmm. Okay. And professional poker player Dan Harrington, also a relative? Mm-hmm. Okay. So tapping into these bloodlines, I want you to think of every NFL head coach you ever played for and tell us which one would be the best golfer, which one would be the best poker player, and who would be the best quarterback.
Oh my God. Okay. So I had 8 years, 7 seasons in the NFL. I had 10 head coaches. You understand?
All right. So you've got a lot of to choose from.
Marty Mornhinweg, Steve Mariucci, Dick Geron, Rod Marinelli, Nick Saban, Cam Cameron, Bobby Petrino, Emmett Thomas, Mike Smith, Sean Payton.
Damn.
Boom. 10.
That is wow. 10 in 7 seasons. It's almost hard to do.
Player.
I mean, Nick's the guy that said that he's not going to Alabama. He had to be pretty poker face with that statement, right?
Yeah, but he was straight up with him.
I'm going to go. Ooh, okay, hold on. Okay, 1, 2, 3.
We got him.
There's too many to think through. That's the problem. Okay. Best quarterback would be Sean Payton.
Okay. Got that one out of the way. That makes sense.
Yep. Best quarterback, Sean Payton. best poker player is going to be Steve Mariucci.
Mooch.
Because
bluffing.
What's that?
A lot of bluffing.
A lot of bluffing. A lot of making people feel good. A lot of Steve can smile. Yeah, he can be your best friend. It's like, all right, you can work a room, but I could see him working a table. It's, oh yeah, what do you got? Oh my God, that's such a great hand. Wham, 2 aces.
He check raises you there. Yeah. I get
Nothing here. Wham. Okay, what do I got left? Best golfer. Although I'm going to go back on this because Bobby Petrino. Okay, hold on. So Bobby Petrino, after our game, I think it was a Thursday night. I think it was a Monday night game, maybe, because we had a Monday night game, I believe so, against the Colts, maybe. Anyway, they all get confused. Bobby Petrino walks into the locker room, and after the game, we got our tail kicked. And he says, every single one of you need to go home, look at yourself in the mirror, and decide what you can do to help this team get better. The next morning, there was a note on our locker that he had left, and that night he was in Fayetteville, Arkansas, doing pig suey. So I'm going to go back and say that
he took all your money.
But Bobby Petrino would be the best poker player because he could look you straight in the eye and tell you the biggest lie and then flip and do what's best for Bobby afterwards. Okay, there we go. That's the best poker player. And I'm actually going to say the best golfer would be... So none of them were good. And I'm going to say the best golfer could be, isn't, but could be Mooch. Because he's not going to get too upset about it, right? We are not professional golfers. We are rundown former football players, decrepit old guys who think they can still move a little bit. But Mooch, I could see him just getting out there and being like, yeah, I'm going to have some fun. So tell him, just not even worry. Because the guys that get all pissed off and worry, and start playing terrible are the ones who think they're actually good.
Right.
And I could see him being just relaxed enough where it's like, yeah, I'm not going to try and be good. I'm just going to be me.
And there it is. That's the 2-minute drill. You definitely had, that was a muddy pocket, man. You had a lot of coaches to sort through, and but he found it. He found the end zone, Juice.
God, you give me, that's like saying, what's your favorite Crayola, crayon color in that pack of like 264? Like,
with the sharpener built in and the whole thing.
Like, do you want raw umber or do you want dark brown? I don't think you knew I had 10 coaches before you head coach.
I didn't know you had 10. I was thinking, all right, he was on 3 teams. I just thought it was going to be quick and easy. But now that you say it, yeah. But great answers, regardless, whatever it took for you to get there. All we care about is getting a great answer. And there were a whole lot of them today, man. This was so much fun. Appreciate you just being so gracious with your time.
Yeah.
And especially if you're sending those letters out. I'm going to let JT know that you send your own invite letters out. Yeah. You know what he's going to tell me, though? I worked for Harvey Green and Jason Taylor, same kind of boss. He's going to say, well, if you want me to send letters, what the hell am I paying you for? So that's what he's going to tell me. But good luck with the event. And, if you want, if we can send you, I don't know if you guys do an auction or something, we'd love to send something.
I appreciate it. Yeah, no, it's OJ will tell you all about it once he
gets his email.
Yeah, I'm looking forward.
It's a pretty unique event. It's not like anything you've been to before. So looking forward to sharing it with a new group of guys.
Looking forward to it, Joey. Hey, Joey, thank you for diving in, man.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me.
You're now diving into the fish tank.